Hi guys, we're just gonna wait a few more minutes to start and wait for a couple more classes to file in.
I'll be close by.
Hi everyone, we're going to start now. So this is our last block of this year's Middle East and North Africa Day. And so this block's panel is going to focus on migrants and refugees. So please feel free to ask questions during the Q&A portion, which will be the last 20 minutes of the block, using the QR code up there. And if you're watching the live stream, it'll be in the description. We're privileged to be able to hear from various perspectives on this topic, from people who have their own personal experiences right here. Let's all keep in mind though that these are their stories and do not and should not attempt to capture all dimensions of this complex subject or speak for all people. We hope this helps to educate and expand on your perspectives and we can learn from each other as much as we can. So we're first going to hear a presentation.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming to the Middle East Day, or Middle East and North Africa Day. My name is Dima Albasha. I'm the mother of Angelina Kehya. She's a senior at Newton North, and I have the pleasure to present to you today. I'm from Syria, and I came to the United States in 2012, right after the war had started back home. We had a very nice life back home. I'm from Aleppo, so we're proud of Aleppo Citadel. We have a nice city, like it's the oldest, it's claimed to be one of the oldest continuous inhabitant cities in the world. You would see this is Angelina and her cousin in a public park, and on the right you see my mom and my aunts, and I'm showing this to show you how women in the Middle East have a choice to wear the scarf or not. This is, of course, if they are Muslims. Many people in the Middle East are Christians. This is me with Angelina in our house. This is a mosque next to a church in the center of Aleppo, and this is a unique way how people in the Middle East socialize. So they would go to prayers, whether in church or in mosque, and after the prayers, they will socialize together. Christmas is celebrated widely in the Middle East. This is it's decorated everywhere. Actually, it's decorated way more than Boston. This is a nice old house in Aleppo. And this is sadly how some of the old houses are destroyed because of the war. This is a church, and this is how it became. This is a mosque, and this is how it was destroyed. Luckily, many of those have been reconstructed, and they are in a better shape right now. This is the Sheraton Hotel, and this is what happened to it. And this is a video showing you how some of the landmark of Aleppo, how it was and how it became. So the war started in 2011 and lasted, I mean, we think it's almost done, but it's still happening at some parts of Syria. From 2012 to 2016, Aleppo was under attack from both sides, and it became heavily destroyed. Many people fled the country because of the war, and it created the largest refugee crisis in the modern world. is the old souk. Souk is a market. So this is the oldest souk in Aleppo. It's a UNESCO heritage, and it was set into fire in 2012. However, after the war winded down, many people contributed to rebuilding the souk. So this is like the upper photo is how it was before the war, then it was destroyed, but now this is how it looks like. This is a video that shows you the magnitude of the refugee crisis.
Now, you just stop the war, and we don't want to go to Europe. Just stop the war in Syria. Just that.
And yes, just like the boy said, many people don't want to go to Europe or to the USA or anywhere like where they went to. Actually, most Syrians wanted to remain. It wasn't. I never thought of Syria as a place where people were migrate from or flee from. Usually, people would leave for higher education and not because of economic situations or of war zones. It was the safest. It was one of the safest places to live in. However, the dire situations, especially in Aleppo and in other cities in Syria, made many people flee the country, and many fled on just a rubber boat like this, which might sound insane and stupid, but sometimes you don't have other better choices, and this is what you make. This is a photo of the refugee camps in Jordan, at Zaatari. This refugee camp is huge. Many people went there thinking it's only a month or two, but until now it's a place where many people lived there for like 6 years, 7 years. And it's not something like many people who tried to help refugees started creating schools there or kindergartens or something to educate the kids. But there is something called the lost generation of Syria where children didn't get to have proper education. So this is an art show that actually Angelina and I hosted in our house here in Newton. We have a friend who is an American flight attendant, and she was doing a lot of humanitarian aid in Greece. So she would give the refugees art supplies, and she will bring the art to Europe or to the US, where she would sell them and then bring the money back to the refugees. Actually, actually, in the beginning, when Kyra, my friend, suggested this idea, or I attended a presentation that she had, I was like cynical about her idea of art. Like, really? This is what refugees need in the camp? This is how Americans think about helping refugees? It was really, it didn't occur to me what it makes. However, if you think about it, she's empowering them. She's giving them a tool to make a living and not just the money to help them eat. She also gave them some tools to express their emotions and spread awareness all over the world about the refugee crisis. At that art show, we raised over $7,000, which was sent directly to the artists who made the art. So we felt like we could do something to the refugees increase. So in 2016, like you can say that the situation in Aleppo became much better. And when I say better, it's basically like there is no bombing every day and fighting in the streets every day. However, the destruction is huge. This is one of my friend's daughter with her friends. They took their instruments and went to the old city of Aleppo, where it's completely destroyed. Not all of it, but some part of it. And they chose to play there so they can bring some joy to the city and bring the life back. Just so you know, there are a lot of places which are not destroyed in Syria, like a lot of opera theaters, nice hotels, but they didn't want to go there because this is the norm, while just playing music in the middle of the rubbles brings hope back to the city. This is how we feel away from home. So you feel like you have your belongings, you have your head and your legs to walk you, but generally you don't feel much. You feel like it's you lost something, or something is not with you, your heart, your soul. And maybe Rima can talk more about being away from Lebanon, right, Rima? You or from Kuwait? So maybe you can talk to that.
Perfect. So my name is Rima Hajjaj, and I had a little bit of an unusual upbringing. My parents, my mom is American, from Iowa, and my dad is was Lebanese, he's a U.S. citizen now, but originally from Palestine. And I grew up in Kuwait. So very unusual upbringing. I grew up in a Muslim and Christian household. We celebrated all the holidays, and in between 5th and 6th grade, the summer of 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. I don't know how many of you remember that, but we had been living in Kuwait, the entire time. And I'll never forget, because I was at my grandma's house, farm in Iowa, and as I usually did, I would wake up with my Discman. I don't know if you guys know what that is. And I would listen to my music and then come out and have breakfast with my parents. And I remember that morning, I woke up and I just felt this energy that there was something different, there was something wrong. And I came out and my dad was like shaving and my mom was in the kitchen. And I walked into the living room where the TV was on, and I looked, and then I remember turning to my mom and saying, "Why is Danielle getting on a plane? Why is she on TV getting on a plane?" And it was the most surreal thing to see all of my friends from school that were being evacuated. And I'd never experienced that or witnessed that before. And my parents tried to do the best that they could as good parents to convinced me that there was nothing wrong. Everything was going to be fine. They're going on a vacation. and then we're going to go back home to Kuwait soon. Well, my dad had said within 2 weeks. It ended up being an entire year that we could not go back home. We ended up going to Paris. Now, that sounds amazing, right? We're hanging out in Paris, but the problem was that we didn't have any money. The government had shut down all bank accounts associated with Kuwait, and so we were, in a beautiful country in Paris, and waiting to be able to go back home to Kuwait. We were lucky that my dad had some good connections, and he was able to find enough money for my sister and I to go to school. So here we are in a school in Paris, middle of the year, don't know anybody, and just trying to figure out the culture and trying to figure out how we fit in. These were all, very affluent kids. They were diplomat kids, that were getting about $500 allowance a week, and we didn't have money for anything. We didn't have money for hot water, so that was fun, taking showers in winter. My sister and I called the bathroom the icebox, because it really was that. So that was, something that, I had to deal with at a very young age. And yes, there were times when I wasn't treated very well. I was, referred to with derogatory terms coming from the Middle East, being of a Middle Eastern background. And that was probably my first, experience with racism. And that was something that, I learned to use for my own benefit. I learned from that experience. Eventually, I did get to go back to Kuwait. And, I fast forward, moved to the U.S. in 2003, where I attended grad school at Emerson, and eventually used the experiences that I had working with the different cultures, and I joined the FBI, where I worked for 14 years. And that was, I don't think I would have gotten that position if it wasn't for the experiences that I had, particularly being with different cultures and being in those situations, and that I was able to use that for something positive.
So many people would would ask about how we keep connected to our culture, our homeland, and maybe this sounds funny, but I thought about having a license plate on my car that says Syria, just to have something of my own home driving with me everywhere. I love it. Some people would stop me sometimes and say that, oh, I've been to Syria once and I loved it, or I have I'm half Syrian, I have a Syrian mother or a Syrian grandmother, and that simply that they love my place. I would see some notes on my car sometimes, happy faces. I would think like they are, I doubt anyone would draw a happy face just randomly on cars, but I would think it's linked to my license plate, so it brought some joy to me. And we also share a lot of our food with our friends, especially our American friends, because we want them to have a taste of what we have in the Middle East. Just so you know, in the Middle East, every day as a party, we work very hard in the daytime, but at night we go out for dinners, socializing, and dancing a lot. I don't know, like here in America, where would you go to dance if you are my age? But in Syria, you would go to have dinner and then enjoy it, and suddenly, not suddenly, gradually, music will go from slow music to dancing music, and people from all ages will go up and dance. And that's my presentation about Syria, and we're happy to have any questions.
Okay, so now we're going to hear a little bit more from the panelists. So first we're going to hand the mic to them so they can introduce themselves.
So my name is Angelina. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Syria, obviously. That's my mom.
Hi, my name is working. Hi, my name is John, and I'm also from Syria.
Okay, so our first question for you guys is, how was the transition from life in another country to the U.S.?
Well, for me, it was pretty weird because I moved a lot growing up. I think from first grade to fifth grade, it was 5 different schools in 3 different countries. I was born in the U.S., so I lived here for a year in the 4th grade, and I lived for 4 years total in Lebanon before coming to Newton in the 7th grade. Yeah, it was. I mean, I got used to moving, so I guess I would say it was okay. But at first, it was pretty weird because you're like, yeah, like, oh, you know, the world will be done next year, the year after, and then eventually you just like completely lose hope. And you're like, okay, I guess this is the new normal. Kind of like with the pandemic now. Yeah.
So for me, I came in 2012, so I was in 3rd grade, and I didn't know any English, like, at all. I couldn't understand anything. I barely even knew hello. And so I came in and I came during the summer, so when it got to like school time, I like was freaking out because I didn't know what I was expecting. And so I walk in and they just put me in a classroom full of people who are just all talking in a language that I don't understand. And for like the first couple of months, I was just confused all the time. And then I had an ELL teacher and she really helped me out, and I became pretty much fluent or at the same level as everyone else in my grade by like 6 months. So I think that was like the biggest thing about my transition to the US.
I would say that when we came here, we came visiting my sister on a tourist visa, so we didn't expect to stay here. We were planning to go back home, and just the uncertainty and like not knowing if we should go back or not was overwhelming. But after all, we're happy that we didn't go back.
So I came to the U.S. in 2003, so I was obviously an adult. I had mentioned I came for grad school, and it was, even though I had grown up in the American school systems in the countries that I did live in, it was still a change. Talking to the people in my classes about my experiences, you know, I used to, as a very young child, go to Lebanon during the war, the civil war that they had, and I would be at my grandmother's house, and it was normal to have bombs going off outside, and there were times when there were bullets that flew inside the house, and that was normal. And talking to the classmates, they were like, yeah, that's not normal, that's not how we grew up. And so it was just interesting sharing those experiences, and you know, even though there were times when it was pretty scary in you know, being a young kid and having to deal with that, I think all of those things just kind of like give you a little bit of character, and it just helps you kind of see the world a little bit broader than what it is.
All right. What do you wish people understood about the experiences of migrants, refugees, or immigrants in the United States?
I would say that it's, I wish they know how hard it is. We've been here 10 years now, and we don't have a green card. So if you think that getting a green card is automatic or something that you easily get, this is not the case. We also apply for work permit in order to work, which maybe you will never hear about. And I would say something that I wish everyone is aware of is living with a different language is not the easiest thing to do. Even if you're fluent, I consider myself kind of fluent in English, yet, and I don't think about translating my thoughts from Arabic to English, but at some point, after like some time, I would need to rest. I feel like I've been doing something that's not usual. And I feel like this is the case with everyone who lives in a different language.
For me, I would say that like we don't really want to be here. Like if we could have stayed in Syria and was safe and avoided all sorts of problems, we would stay. But like for me personally, like I'm Christian and I grew up in a Catholic school, so the language part like isn't really a problem for me. But like it's just the part of like being so disconnected and not being certain of what's to come. That's the hardest.
Also, adding on to what my mom was saying about not being able to get a green card, it's not just the difficulties that come with that, it's the difficulties that come with like not having one. I don't think anyone realizes how much a green card means. Like for applying to college, which I've been doing recently, I'm not eligible for FAFSA, so a lot of colleges take that into consideration because I'm not a permanent resident or a U.S. citizen. So just all of that combined is just, I think, something that not a lot of people think about.
And to echo that, my experience, being in Paris for that year was that I also didn't want to be there. I want to be home, but you do have to deal with some of the society's reactions to it. Or, you're just here to fleece, the country and live off of the country and get the benefits. And if I had a chance to tell them how much I missed being home and how much I missed my friends, and this was not where I wanted to be, I think that would have made people, maybe understand a little bit the hardships that refugees and immigrants go through.
Okay, so our next question is, how do your past experiences shape the way you go about your day-to-day life now?
Well, for me personally, is it working now? Okay. For me personally, I don't necessarily use them, but like it's kind of like I guess with everything in life, it kind of applies to everyone. Like what you've experienced kind of lets you know what to do and what not to do. Like if I encounter like a certain racist like response from invoking a conversation about a certain subject, I won't really touch on that subject unless I know who I'm speaking with and I know that they won't like say some out-of-pocket stuff. Yeah.
I'd say, like the first few years after the war, I was very sad, and maybe now it's hard to make me sad after what happened, which is good. So this is how it affected my life here. Also, I feel like back home, I used to watch Grey's Anatomy and Friends, and I listened to Western music, while now here, I'm always longing to read in Arabic or watch a TV show in Arabic, even if it's silly. I just want to hear the language and see the people.
So how things changed since you left, like in your home country, to the extent that you know, like as far as you know how things changed?
Well, I would say it's a lot. Okay. I would say it's a lot different because, well, now there's obviously destruction, right? And for Syria, our economy used to be a very good, stable economy. Like, you have the middle class, see them like wearing Western clothes and like, for example, BMWs, Mercedes, all of the stuff that you would expect. You'd expect us from the outside to be like, oh, you guys ride camels and stuff like that, which is like not true at all. We had a very good economy, but after the war, like, for example, a sandwich that you used to buy used to cost like, let's say, 200 Syrian pounds. That sandwich now costs 18,000 Syrian pounds. So it's like, economy's gone out the window, and like, people who have left the country have, when they return, they're encountered sometimes when they're like, oh, like you guys left us behind. Which is like, we didn't really leave you behind. Like, if you were in our situation, you would have also left if you could, type of thing. So.
So in Syria, like even we would like to think that many of the destruction is being rebuilt now, but the sanctions is making it very hard. And the economy, as John has mentioned, the economy has been worse and worse every day. And people in general, I hear people saying that now it's in some way worse than the war times, because in the war times you either live or die because of a bomb, while now you struggle every day with providing things, especially medicine or food. And I wish the sanctions are lifted away. I also want to touch base on something that is not related to the questions. I want to say that in the Middle East and North Africa, Arabic is a shared language and the formal form, which is called Fusha. So everyone knows how to write and read in the formal Arabic. However, we have dialects which are very different from country to country. The Levant area speaks very similar languages, similar dialects. So you would say Syria, Palestine, Jordan, and Iraq. Sometimes Iraq is similar. The Gulf speak similar language, and then Egypt by itself has a different dialect, and Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria has similar dialects. However, everyone knows the formal dialect, which is not spoken, it's just written in books, and also if you are in the UN, this is the language that you would use.
Something I wanted to talk about that I know has changed in Syria, and I don't have like many connections. Most of my connections are through my mom, people she knows in Syria, my dad's side of the family in Syria. But throughout COVID, I have talked to some people, and I think a huge issue with everything going on in Syria was, I automatically just assumed that they'd be doing Zoom school, just like we were doing, but they weren't, because a lot of people, like, their Wi-Fi wouldn't be good, or they didn't have a computer, things like that. So just a lot of that situation, it's just terrible to hear about.
Okay, our next question is, how's your experience finding community or others with shared experiences in Boston?
I think if any of you guys were here for the FWOC panel, it was very surprising to see that there were a lot of Middle Eastern people in Newton North, a lot more than I expected. And I think it's been not very hard to find like a community that understands me, just because I think we're kind of everywhere. Anywhere you go, you're going to find another Middle Eastern person. There are a lot of like different organizations. I know like many colleges will have specific organizations for Middle Eastern people. I know at North we just started a Muslim student association. So there's just a lot of places where I've found my group of people.
There's a 2-second delay with this mic. When I worked, I worked for the FBI, like I said, for 14 years. 7 of those years was here in Boston. And one of the initiatives that I took was to really help, or at least try to help bridge the gap between the culture and understanding of different cultures. And so I did a lot of work with the communities, reaching out to the refugee groups, and also because I come from 2 religions in my background, I would go to the mosque and I would go and meet with the different groups that were there, and I would take my colleagues with me, my colleagues who really didn't have much interaction with any of these groups, and I would introduce them to the Somali community, the Syrian, refugee community, the various communities that were there, the Iraq refugee community, we have a pretty large one here in New England. And I would start with commonalities, food. Everybody loves food, and I found that that was sort of the gatekeeper for people to actually open themselves up to learning about new cultures, and then we would move to music, and it was great because by the end of the 2 months that I had done this, they were now reaching out and inviting us, and we were all getting together. When it was Ramadan, the month of fasting for the Muslims, we would all meet and have what they call iftar, which is breaking of the fast together. And it was just a wonderful experience to see this happen when it never happened before.
It's actually Ramadan right now, and our holiday is coming on May the 2nd. And I also want to say that April was just designated as Arab Heritage Month. It just happened 2 months ago. So this is something that will give us an opportunity to share more of our heritage and invite more Americans to explore it.
Just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can use the QR code to ask them. But for John and Angelina, if you'd like to share, how would you describe your experience at New North, and how has that been?
Well, I'm very white passing, so my name's John, and even my last name's in that Arab, so you wouldn't be able to tell. So it's been, I would say, okay. There's not really there's a representation from us except for this day or this panel. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, kind of same for me. I'm very white passing, and my name is Angelina, so not a lot of people would assume that I'm Middle Eastern or another ethnicity. So I think the main thing for me is when I tell people, I think a lot of people are just really curious. I haven't had any bad experiences. I think a lot of people are just really curious. They love hearing about my culture, and I love when people ask me questions, and I love answering them.
Okay, so for our last question from us, it's just, do you have any other stories you would like to share just about your experiences, either in the other countries or in the U.S. that you think we should hear?
I would say that we recently, with the current events of Russia and Ukraine, we hear about the refugee crisis of Ukraine. We feel very bad about it. We just feel also a little angry because we hear all the racist comments about how the Ukrainians have blue eyes and blonde hair, or they are Christians, and this is why Europe should allow them to come. While my experience watching the refugee crisis back in 2014 was mostly about how to stop refugees from coming to Europe and not allowing them to pass. And of course, this is a generalization of the situation, but it's very different, especially with specific countries. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I feel like it was really weird hearing on the news that these Ukrainians are civilized people. They're not like the people of Iraq. So that always pisses you off. And it's you're here on a pretty major broadcast like MSNBC, and you sound like an idiot. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes we don't have direct experience with racism. However, from time to time you can feel it engraved deep inside some of the people. And I don't know what makes blonde people more civilized than not blonde people.
Just another thing I want to say, we do have people with blonde hair and blue eyes, so if you're curious.
Does in fact have blue eyes. Just so you know, when I felt my race black question with white, some people would say you're not white, and I look at my skin and it just feel like it looks white. So I feel like the definition of white should be changed because, white is not a race, it's a color. This is my own. Well, I mean, kind of similar to that, when I'm filling out forms and stuff and they ask me about my race, I never really know what to answer because every time I answer white, people tell me, you're not white, you're Middle Eastern, but there's not an option for Middle Eastern, so I don't know what to tell you, it's just not. There's no brown, too.
Just something to keep in mind when you're talking about, refugees and the learning about them and really understanding what's happening with the refugee crises, because there's multiple going around the world. We rely heavily on social media, to get our information. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of that too. The one thing is just to understand that obviously there's a disinformation campaign. Some of you may have heard about that, where people purposely put information on social media to get a reaction or to change people's mindsets about different groups. This is something that actually worked when I was in the FBI, so it's a little personal and important to me, is making sure that you identify news sources that will give you the information that you need to truly understand what is going on in the situation. For example, and I think it's because I grew up overseas, I just knew about different media outlets. I actually get my news from 5 different sources from around the world. If there's something I'm interested in, I will read that, and that's how I get my information, and then I formulate my own opinion. I say this because I have seen a tremendous amount of misinformation about what's going on right now with the Ukraine crisis, but to Dima's point, there's still wrong information being put out there about the Syrian refugees and people making unfortunate comments about them versus the Ukrainian refugees. So just something to keep in mind.
I also wanted to add, my mom mentioned this earlier, but when we were doing the art show, I think that really got me thinking. So, I mean, it wasn't a hard thing to do, kind of just organizing this whole event. We had it at our house. I played music during the event, and we brought some appetizers, put them out, and people were coming in and out, and it was a big hit. And I think that really had an impact. And I think a lot of people want to help but don't know how. And I think any donation to any organization that helps refugees, or even if you want to organize an event like that, go ahead. That's very helpful. But yeah, I think just doing really anything you can, even if it's just donating a couple of dollars to an organization, anything helps.
Okay. So we have a couple questions from people watching. First question is, did you have to witness war before arriving in the U.S., and what was your experience coming to the U.S. like? Which I know we sort of already.
So we kind of came to the U.S. pretty early on, but even then, we did see a few things. One time I was in school in 2nd grade, and there was a bomb that went off in the building right next to us. So we all kind of just fled down to the basement and just stayed there the entire day, and then we went home. And obviously everyone was scared to send their kids to school after that, because it's just not safe anymore.
Yeah, I personally have as well. When I was leaving Syria mainly, we had to cross like rebel groups checkpoint. That rebel group is now known, turned into a branch of like ISIS. So we're practically crossing ISIS checkpoint. And yeah, so stuff like that. You'd hear stuff like, oh, like so and so, it's like near this place where a bomb blew off, or like one time, like sometimes here, I lived in like what now still is probably the safest area of Aleppo, like the old house I used to live in, still like standing untouched. So I was generally safe, but like, you would hear about stuff, and you would sometimes physically hear sounds of bullet and whatnot.
Are there things you assumed about the U.S. before you came here that you were surprised about when you came?
Yes. I never thought that there will be no lights at night in Newton. Like usually you would think most of America would look like New York or like big buildings most of the time, so you don't think much. I mean, typically we know America from the movies. Also, one thing that I realized when I used to watch horror movies, there were lots of doors in the house, and we usually have one door to our houses in Syria, like only one door. There is no kitchen door or like basement door, and I thought that was silly in the horror movies, but I came here and I saw like 9 doors in a house or 7 doors in a house, so yeah, like something like that.
Well, me personally, not really. I have a lot of family that live in America, and all my family are American citizens, so I used to come like back and forth every few months, I would say, for like a visit in America. So like I kind of experienced it all.
Okay, our next question is, what is your favorite food or aspect of your culture? I know we talked about it a little bit now, but...
Kibisa pachadi is my favorite food. It's amazing. You guys should all look it up and try it, because it's my favorite thing. I could take a bath in it. It's basically, actually, can you explain it? I don't really know.
Maybe you know kibbeh. Kibbeh is like meatballs, meat mixed with burger and stuffed with meat, but then we cook it with quince and then in pomegranate molasses, in pomegranate juice with meat. So, but it's really good, and I love the music. I feel like it's a warm music. Usually, like the instruments talk to each other. It's very different from the classical or orchestra music. So I miss the music a lot.
For me, my favorite food is grape leaves. It's so good. I think some of you may know what that is. Yeah, my favorite aspect of my culture is really like the weddings. We have such good weddings. They're really fun to go to.
I'm trying to think, because there is so much good food in Middle Eastern food, Arab food, and we're lucky that there are some really good restaurants. They're just not the same as home cooked. I'm spoiled because my nephew's dad, Nadim, his dad, is a phenomenal cook, and he makes the best dishes, and I'm lucky because he sends me care packages through my sister all the time, so I'm lucky I can pretty much ask for what I want and he can make it. But I think as far as the culture goes, there's just something about, I would say, Mediterranean culture, because the Italians and the Greeks have that as well, but family is so important, and that's something that I grew up with, spending time with my grandmother, even as people get older, they don't really put like senior citizens or your elderly in homes. We just don't do that. Everybody, has They have them move in, they take care of them. And that love of family is just something that I wish more people here could experience.
All right. Also, just so you guys know, there are people with microphones. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. So. But also, how does it feel to live with people who have never had to live with danger, or like who haven't? How does it feel? Is there a disconnect with people who have never experienced danger where they live?
So I think humans adapt to whatever circumstances they go through. And I came in 2012 from Aleppo, which, I mean, the war wasn't there yet, like in Aleppo, but many bullets or ransom, kidnapping and bombing would have happened by the time I came. And then Boston bombing happened, the marathon bombing. And I mean, yeah, it was scary, but then Watertown and Newton were shut down because of only 2 people were running away. And for me, I was used to so many people running away with so many weapons. So that felt a little bit like I'm not aware of how much of a danger is out there because I kind of lived in it for a few months before I came. However, I kind of relate or understand because before the war, we would be scared of something, of little things happening. So yeah.
So I mentioned when I was little, I was at my grandmother's house, and there were bombs going off, and there were bullets flying in the house, and that was normal for me. But even before that, when I was in school, I think I was in preschool. One of my first memories was being at the American school in Kuwait, and they were bombing the French embassy, which was next to it, and the U.S. consulate. And so one of my first memories is, glass shattering, having to evacuate for bombs, and I think that definitely changed me as I became an adult because that was normal to me. And when I see things happen overseas, what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, I can understand for people who may not have gone through that it's shocking. But I think for people like me and anybody that's grown up in conflict zones, your sense of reality and what's normal, what's not normal, what's shocking, what's not shocking is completely different. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I went into the FBI, because I could deal with that stuff, and I worked, counterterrorism for 12 years. And I think it's something that kind of stays with you.
Okay. Go ahead.
My question was, because I know Angelina and John kind of talked about it last block, but have you ever been in a situation where you faced racism, but you thought that your experience was invalid because of your skin color? Like, I know you guys talked about not feeling enough, in your culture.
Not really, again, because mainly we're white passing, it's not necessarily, but it's mainly you think of stuff that happened a few years back, and you're like, oh, that was racist. You realize it years after, at the time you think it's something normal. That's the main kind of racism is invalid. Or a question, one time in school, when I first moved to America, I was in elementary school, and a teacher asked me about electricity wires in Syria, as if I understand or remember it. So it's kind of events like that are invalidated. It's not really racism, but it's also incredibly ignorant and just dumb to ask a 10-year-old about electricity.
I'm trying to think. So I think the one situation that I've been in where I've kind of experienced that is I was having this conversation about religion with someone, and he, I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something about how Islam was very, like, it was a very old religion and how, like, it shouldn't be as strict anymore. And I was just, like, kind of shocked by this because, I mean, he knows that I'm a Muslim and I'm, like, sitting there right in front of him and he just said that to me. And so I'm like, well, everyone has different ways of practicing Islam, but it's like still a valid religion. It's just like, he was Jewish, so it's just like Judaism. Like everyone has different levels of practicing Judaism. And then he said, well, you don't wear the hijab or anything. And I was like, well, yeah, because I have the option to not.
I think regarding religion, I think many people would think about Islam as the only religion in the Middle East. However, we have Judaism and Christianity. But I also want to say that even, like, all religions are very old religions. Like, you can't say that one religion is old and the other is not. Actually, like, the other religions are way older than Islam. The stereotype is Muslims are all practiced in the same level. So if you see us without a scarf, you might think that we are not practicing. We're practicing, but we just chose not to wear the scarf. Just like a Christian who wouldn't go to Sunday church, but still believe in what Christianity thinks of. Just thought I will bring this.
I have just a quick story to share about religion, and it's not just something that's, people face issues here. When I was in Beirut, I went there for college, and I'll never forget this because it was winter time, and we were about ready to break for Christmas, and it was also Ramadan. So the teacher went around the classroom and asked what everybody was planning to do for their holiday break. So I said that I am fasting and I'm going to break my fast that weekend with Christmas dinner. And it caused, I would say, it was a riot in the class. Literally, people jumped up. I was screamed at, and I had people on both sides telling me that I couldn't do that and I had to choose. That you had to either be a Muslim or you had to be a Christian. You couldn't do both. And that was my first experience with, with religious conflict. And if anybody is familiar with Lebanese history, it's not new for them. They have, I think, 17 or 18 different religious sects that operate. And the Civil War was essentially based on religion, but my answer at the end was still, this is how I was raised. I was raised in a multi-faith household, and this is normal for us. So this is my normal. You have yours, and I have mine. But I hope that I was maybe able to change at least one person in the classroom's sort of viewpoint on religions can coexist.
Yes, I mean, I would say exactly what Rima said. I think and I don't want to say that it's in all Syria, but in my community, which is considered a moderate, liberal, conservative, we're not very conservative. So celebrating Christmas is something usual with friends. We have friends over for iftar, and some of our friends would just volunteer, okay, since you're inviting me, I will fast with you today, which is cool. I remember I had a big iftar at my house here in America, and I had many American friends coming, and they said, oh, we will let the fasting people eat first. And I looked around, and most of my Syrian and Lebanese friends were not fasting. Some of them were Christians, some of them were Muslims who don't actually fast or practice. So I said, I think we're the only one fasting now, so you can just eat. It's just assumption. Also, when Americans come to our place, they would assume that all my friends are Muslims, and I'll have to remind them, no, we have, like, those are Christians, those are, like, we will have to remind them that we come from different religions.
Just one last comment on that, and you know, Dima, you can certainly, I think, comment on this as well. I don't know if many people know that with Arab names, you can oftentimes determine somebody's religion from their last name, and so that is something very unique. But you know, when you meet people, sometimes if you have a more neutral name, it's a common question. They'll ask, like, are you a Christian or Muslim? Trying to figure you out. But that's something that's different from here.
Yeah, like Angelina's family name, Kefia, is a very prominent Muslim family name in Syria. So I didn't hesitate to name her Angelina because I thought people will know that she's a Muslim. I didn't know we're coming to the U.S. and people will assume that she's Christian.
All right, so that's all we have time for, but thank you guys so much.